My name is Claire Monroe. I am 30 years old, and in my family that makes me officially expired. In their eyes, I've passed the age of marriageable bloom, missed the train to corporate respectability, and worst of all, chosen a career that doesn't come with a title on a door or a fixed paycheck on the 1st and 15th of every month. You see, I grew up in a family that treats tradition like religion and independence like a disease. My mother was a school administrator for 35 years. My father an accountant with a penchant for spreadsheets and quiet dinners. My uncles were lawyers, engineers, civil servants. Safe, stable spreadsheet lives. The kind that came with retirement funds, bonus seasons, and matching outfits for family photos. And then there was me. No one ever said it outright. But I learned early that I was the wrong kind of daughter. I didn't color inside the lines, didn't pursue law school like Ivy, my golden cousin. I studied design, not fashion design, which might have been slightly forgivable in their eyes. I chose visual communication, the kind that doesn't fit neatly into any family WhatsApp group announcement. By the time I was 25, Ivy had already been promoted to associate director at a corporate firm in Midtown, flashing her MBA and ring from a man with a LinkedIn bio longer than a Christmas letter. At that same family dinner, I was asked by my aunt, not unkindly, "Still doing your little drawings, Claire little drawings," like the award-winning infographics I developed for an NGO campaign that raised over $2 million for refugee education. Like the motion graphics I built for an edtech platform that doubled its user base after launch. But of course, those weren't real jobs. They weren't on a business card. The real beginning of this story, though, wasn't a dinner or a comparison. It was a moment so subtle and insidious that I didn't even realize it would scar me until months later. 3 years ago, I worked at a boutique creative agency in Brooklyn. I wasn't a founder or partner, just a lead designer, but I was trusted, respected. Until one morning, I watched the senior partner present a proposal to a Fortune 500 client. The deck mine, the strategy mine, the animation that made the client say this is exactly what we were looking for mine. No credit, not even a nod. It wasn't theft, not in the legal sense, just the old game of creative erasure. They wanted my ideas, not my name. That night, I walked out of that office, got on the L train with shaking hands and a burning stomach, and cried for 6 stops straight. That weekend, I quit. It was the first time I truly felt invisible, and the first time I realized that no one was coming to rescue me. What came next was not the classic montage of startup glory. It was 6 months of spiraling. I lived off savings, racked up silent credit card debt, and avoided every family gathering. I couldn't bear to hear my mother ask if I had found something stable yet. I couldn't listen to Ivy's social media updates about her new fiancé, her promotion, her condo renovation. My mind was foggy, my pride was crushed, and for the first time in my life, I doubted whether I actually had any talent at all. But when you're at rock bottom, the silence becomes an ally. That's when I discovered something most people only encounter in the aftermath of trauma: financial clarity. I stumbled upon a podcast called Choose FI, where 2 former 9-to-5ers talked about reclaiming freedom through financial independence. The numbers spoke to me in a way no therapist ever had. Budgeting, investing, minimalism. It wasn't just money, it was control. I set up a strict 50-30-20 budget. 50% for essentials, 30% for building an emergency fund, 20% into low-fee index funds via a Roth IRA. I stopped eating out, canceled every unnecessary subscription, sold half my wardrobe online. Within 4 months, I had enough saved to buy time 3 full months of living expenses, plus runway to finally build what I'd long dreamed about. A platform for learning creativity that doesn't treat art like fluff or luxury. No grades, no gatekeeping, no academia speak, just clarity, guidance, and dignity for self-taught creatives. I called it Idea Bloom. At first, it was just a blog, then a weekly email, then a series of recorded lessons I built in my studio apartment using borrowed lighting and a secondhand camera. Every Sunday, I released a new module. 10 people watched, then 20, then 75. Still no income, but something was growing, and I had stopped crying. Then, one afternoon mid-December, while sipping the same generic tea I drank every day, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Claire, we need to talk. Ivy's engagement party is in March. Everyone's expecting you to come. Please don't embarrass us. There it was again. That sentence, that undertone, don't embarrass us. It was never said outright, but it was always there. I wasn't just the underachiever. I was the liability. The girl who might wear something inappropriate, say something too liberal, or worst of all, talk about that freelance thing she was still doing in her 30s. I stared at the message. I didn't respond, but I saved it. Because something inside me had shifted. I didn't know it then, but that message would become the first entry in a folder I would one day name Reasons They'll Regret It. You don't leave a paying job in New York without a plan, at least not if you're someone like me. Raised in a family where security was the unofficial family crest, quitting was a luxury reserved for other people. But that day in early November, as I stepped out of the agency's glass door for the last time, I wasn't thinking about 401ks or resumes. I was thinking about the silence that followed every time I spoke up in meetings. I was thinking about the way my manager would say, "We're presenting our strategy," knowing full well the notes came from my sleepless nights. I didn't walk away to be brave. I walked away because staying would have killed something inside me. I took the long way home that night off the L through McCarran Park, then down Bedford. The city was lit up for the holidays. Families were laughing, couples carrying overpriced candles. I walked through it all feeling like I didn't belong. Not in that city, not in that life. I spent the next morning sitting cross-legged on the hardwood floor of my apartment, surrounded by old sketch pads, a half-dead plant, and 2 weeks' worth of unopened mail. The silence in the apartment was thick. I stared at my laptop, the LinkedIn tab, open but untouched. And then I opened a blank Google Doc instead. File name, what I would build if I wasn't afraid. I wrote the title and stared at it for almost an hour. The thing about crashing when you do it alone is that no one brings you orange juice or tissues. There's no violin music, just a slow, corrosive realization that you have to choose stay numb or claw your way back. I chose the second. That night I began what I later called my reclamation plan. It started with 3 columns on a whiteboard: what I know, what I hate, what the world needs, what I knew visual thinking, storytelling, user experience, and how to build online learning that didn't bore people to death. What I hated: buzzwords, corporate gatekeeping, design theory that made people feel small. What the world needed: accessible creative education, tools for people who didn't have the time or money for 4 years of tuition. That's when the idea of Idea Bloom came to me. Not as a business, as a solution. But before I could build anything, I needed something I didn't have runway. The financial part of my life was a slow-burning mess. I wasn't broke, but I was bleeding. Rent, subscriptions, lunches to network, and a few too many deliveries from the kind of Thai place that didn't even bother with utensils anymore. I remembered a podcast I once bookmarked, but never listened to the Mad Fientist. I clicked play. By midnight, I had devoured 4 episodes on FIRE, financial independence, retire early, and a fire, no pun intended, was lit. This wasn't about retiring at 35. It was about building the freedom to make decisions not rooted in fear. So I did something radical. I opened a fresh Excel sheet and started treating my life like a business. Step 1. Find my burn rate. I calculated my monthly cost of living: rent $14.50, utilities and Wi-Fi $160, groceries $280, subscriptions $112. Embarrassing, yes. Minimum credit card payments $240, everything else too vague to track. That had to change. Step 2, slash and optimize. I moved to a cheaper sublet in Bushwick, cutting rent by $400. I canceled 6 subscriptions, kept only Notion and Figma Pro. I batch cooked all meals, switched to cash envelopes, and set up auto deposits into a high-yield savings account. In 2 months, I cut expenses by 38%. I created an emergency fund with 3 months' expenses. I opened a Roth IRA and began investing $250 a month in low-cost index funds through Vanguard, 80% VTI, 20% VXS. Nothing fancy, just long-term compound interest. With every financial decision, I felt myself coming back to life. The fog began to lift. Then came the question, what exactly would Idea Bloom be? I wasn't building a blog. I wasn't selling online courses like everyone else. I wanted a learning ecosystem, not just content, but community and clarity. A place where people who weren't designers could still learn to communicate beautifully. I started simple. 1 email newsletter per week, a Notion-based free resource library, a private Slack channel for early subscribers. I shared the first email with 19 people. Within 2 weeks, 9 responded, and 2 strangers joined the Slack. It was microscopic, but it was real. More importantly, it was mine. By January, I was teaching 1 microclass per week on Loom-recorded unpolished RAW. By February, I had a free challenge called 5 Days to Better Visual Notes. It went semi-viral on Twitter. My list grew to 200 people. No revenue yet, but interest. And interest, when tracked and nurtured, becomes momentum. I started mapping my conversion funnel like a growth marketer, used tools like Hotjar to track behavior on the site, sent surveys to early users asking what they feared most, feeling stupid, not knowing how to start thinking creativity wasn't for me. So I designed Idea Bloom to counter all of that. By March, I launched the first paid cohort, $89 for a 3-week live sprint. I needed 20 signups to break even. I got 38. That night, I lit a candle, the fancy one, and I wrote 1 sentence in my journal. This time, they won't be able to erase my name. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace. It comes from exhaustion. That was the silence I lived in during the spring that followed my first paid launch. From the outside, I was on my way up. Idea Bloom had real students, real testimonials. My inbox was no longer just marketing spam and family group texts. It was filled with real people asking real questions, thanking me. But internally, I was unraveling. It's funny, no one ever warns you that the thing you built to save yourself might one day become your burden. Every email I wrote, every module I filmed, every client request, I took them all personally. Because this wasn't just content. It was my lifeline, my proof, my penance. But one Wednesday morning in April, it all cracked. I'd slept 3 hours. My skin was breaking out. My voice was hoarse from talking to a webcam for hours. I opened my laptop, looked at my to-do list, which I had color-coded, labeled, tagged, and optimized, and burst into tears. Not cinematic tears, not poetic ones, just dry, tired, broken sobs. Because in trying to prove my worth to a world that once called me invisible, I had built a new trap for myself, over-functioning as atonement. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment with a notebook and a glass of discount wine, and did what any good strategist does when the campaign isn't converting. I ran a postmortem. Where did I go wrong? It wasn't the business model. I had 82 paying students, a churn rate under 5%, and email open rates that made SaaS founders jealous. The product was solid, but the operator, she was burning out. So I created a new framework, one I hadn't read in any book or course. Claire, the framework that saved Claire. C, calendar control. I blocked 2 days a week for deep work. No Zooms, no Slack, no explaining. L, leverage delegation. I hired a part-time virtual assistant from the Philippines to manage emails and community replies. A, automate what drains you. I switched to auto-scheduling for social media and built a Zapier sequence that tagged high-engagement subscribers. R, rebuild for scale. I shifted from one-to-one consulting to one-to-many delivery, introduced asynchronous office hours instead of live calls. E, energy-first prioritization. I color-coded tasks not by urgency, but by how they affected my energy. Green gave me energy. Red drained it. Reds were outsourced or killed. By June, I wasn't just functioning, I was thriving. Idea Bloom became a machine that respected my humanity. And the funny thing, as soon as I stopped performing martyrdom, everything scaled better. Word of mouth grew. I was invited onto 2 podcasts. A director of L&D from a Fortune 500 company emailed me. We've been looking for a partner to train our internal creative teams. Your style is exactly what we need. Are you open to licensing? I had to read that email 3 times. Licensing, not consulting. Not time for money. Scale, stability, strategy. We booked a call. I presented a stripped-down version of the Idea Bloom curriculum as a plug-and-play LMS module. I charged $12,000 for a 6-month license renewable. They signed within 72 hours. From that one deal, I covered 6 months of rent, taxes, and operating costs. But more than that, I realized something: I didn't need to be everywhere. I just needed to be essential. Yet through all this, I remained silent with my family. There were no proud announcements in the Monroe family group chat, no forwarded articles, no look who's doing well moments. Because I still remembered every dismissal. Claire's too sensitive. She's allergic to structure. She needs to stop playing around and get a real job. But the truth is, I didn't stay silent out of spite. I stayed silent out of protection. Some people wait their whole lives for validation from their parents. I had stopped waiting. I was building something better, internal validation rooted in clarity. And that clarity told me something important. I was no longer the same girl they had pitied. I was the architect of my own life. One day in late July, my mother called out of the blue. Ivy's engagement party is being moved up, she said. It's in 2 months. She wants everyone there. I hesitated. She specifically asked if you were coming. I didn't believe that. But I also didn't care. I'll think about it, I said. But what I really thought was this: if I go, I won't be going as the invisible one. I'll be going as the woman they tried to erase. I didn't RSVP to Ivy's engagement party right away. I didn't even put it in my calendar. I let the date float in the background like one of those unread emails you mark as important but secretly hope to ignore forever. The truth, I wasn't sure if I could walk into that house again, the Monroe family estate in Westchester, with its polished banisters and polished people. The place where my accomplishments had always gone to die quietly in the corner of the guest room, while Ivy's latest award got its own toast. But silence had become my default. Not because I lacked stories to tell, but because I finally understood the value of telling them to the right people. Summer drifted into late August. Idea Bloom was no longer a side hustle or a lifeline. It had become infrastructure scalable, replicable, and surprisingly even investable. After my first licensing deal closed, I was approached by a boutique edtech fund that had seen my growth on LinkedIn. The managing partner, Julia Tron, a woman who had built and sold 2 SaaS companies before 40, slid into my inbox with a simple question. Are you thinking about scale? Because what you've built is unusually sticky. Sticky. It was the first time anyone had described my work as sticky. When I told Julia I had no outside funding and no plans for a full venture round, she laughed and said, "Then let's talk about optionality." We met on Zoom. I wore a black blouse and lit a candle out of habit. I presented a deck not filled with hockey stick projections, but with retention curves, case studies, and unit economics that made sense. At the end, she asked, "How did you learn all this?" I answered truthfully, "By surviving." That call didn't result in a term sheet, but it didn't need to. Julia introduced me to 2 learning strategists, and within weeks, I had launched a second vertical inside Idea Bloom, a creator-in-residence program for instructors in underserved regions, licensing my framework in exchange for profit sharing. It was working, slowly, steadily, and I still hadn't told anyone in my family. But the world was watching. I was featured in a mid-sized industry blog under the headline, "The Solo Founder Rethinking Creative Education for Adults." Then came an invitation to write a guest column for Medium's Creators Hub, then a podcast, then another. I was becoming known, not viral, not celebrity, but known. Quietly, steadily, irrevocably. But nothing compared to what happened one Thursday afternoon. It started with a DM on Twitter, from a name I didn't recognize, Melissa Carter. "Hi Claire, I hope this isn't weird. I work in L&D at North Edge Partners. I just wanted to say thank you. Your workshop last month changed how I approach my work. Honestly, it changed how I see myself." North Edge. That was Ivy's fiancé's firm. I stared at the message. Melissa. Melissa Carter. I clicked her profile. Blonde. Sharp. HR generalist turned L&D lead. Engaged to Nathan Aldridge. So Ivy's fiancé's company was using my training modules, and his direct report had messaged me. My heart did a strange lurch, not from arrogance, but from something older, deeper. That desperate childhood wish for recognition. And yet it wasn't Nathan or Ivy who reached out. It was someone new, someone unburdened by family bias. She saw me, without any of the family framing. She saw the work, not the narrative. And that felt cleaner than any apology ever could. That night I opened the Monroe family WhatsApp group for the first time in months. Uncle Jared had sent another photo of Ivy and Nathan smiling in front of their newly purchased brownstone. Someone had commented, "Power couple." I didn't say anything. But for the first time, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt detachment, like watching a show I no longer auditioned for. Then came the envelope. Thick cream-colored, delivered by courier, not an email, not a text. An actual engraved card with gold embossing. Mr. and Mrs. Douglas Monroe cordially invite you to celebrate the engagement of their daughter Ivy Monroe to Mr. Nathan Aldridge. It was elegant, perfect, predictable, but the note tucked inside was unexpected. Claire, it would mean the world if you came. We haven't always shown it, but we're proud of you. Love, Ivy. I stared at that final sentence for a long time. Proud, had she seen the podcast? Had Nathan told her? Or was it performative strategic? I didn't know. But I knew one thing: if I went, I wouldn't be coming as the cousin who does online stuff. I'd be walking in as a woman who had spent 3 years building her name from the ground up. And the moment that decision settled into my chest, I opened a new tab and searched Best Tailor for structured minimalist formal wear NYC. Because if I was going to show up, I'd show up in every sense of the word. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had been made to feel like the family embarrassment, the cautionary tale, Claire the one with potential, which was always code for failure waiting to happen. Now 2 months before Ivy's engagement party, I was fielding emails from 3 separate corporate teams asking to pilot Idea Bloom as part of their internal upskilling programs. One of them, a subsidiary of a Fortune 200 media group. I had built a platform that worked. Not flashy, not viral, but functional, effective, human. But with each new win, something odd started happening. My name, Claire Monroe, began circulating outside my newsletter list. LinkedIn connections surged. Workshop invitations came from places I'd never pitched. A recruiter from EDO left a comment on one of my blog posts. This is the kind of clarity I wish more design educators had. And then came the call, from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was professional but warm. Ms. Monroe. This is Taylor from the Women Who Build Foundation. We're hosting a closed-door panel next month in DC. Senior educators, policy influencers, L&D heads from the private sector. One of our advisors sent us your name. We'd love for you to speak. I sat in silence for a beat too long, not because I was shocked, but because something deep inside me, something that had been curled up for years, was finally beginning to uncurl. They wanted me not as a token, not as a diversity checkbox, not as someone's assistant. They wanted my ideas, my voice, my system. So I said yes, and when I hung up, I didn't cry. I opened my Notion dashboard, pulled up my impact report, and added a new goal: Keynote 2024, minimum 1 national stage. I wasn't just running a business anymore, I was building a legacy. In preparation for the engagement party, I did something uncharacteristic. I hired a stylist. Not the luxury over-the-top type. Just a woman named Andrea who worked with professionals rebranding themselves post-divorce, post-burnout, post-reinvention. Her tagline: I dress women for the chapters they haven't written yet. She asked me a single question. What do you want them to feel when you walk in? I answered without hesitation. That I didn't disappear. I just became too big to be contained in their frame. She smiled. Got it. On the morning of the party, I stood in front of my mirror wearing a structured navy jumpsuit, tailored within a millimeter of precision. The neckline was square. The back was low. The lines were sharp. I wore no necklace, no frills, just a single silver bracelet engraved with 3 words: earned, not given. My hair was swept back. My skin was clean. I looked like someone who could walk into a room of VCs or into a family dining room and not flinch either way. As I stepped into the Uber, I opened my notes app and scrolled to an old voice memo I had saved over a year ago. One recorded during a night of insomnia and self-doubt. It said, "If no one claps, will you still perform?" Back then, I didn't have an answer. But now I knew. The Monroe estate hadn't changed. The same manicured hedges, the same smell of pine cleaner and polite tension. The guests hadn't changed either, a sea of old money, newer Botox, and recycled compliments. As I walked through the foyer, a few heads turned. A couple aunts blinked in surprise. Claire, I nodded, smiled, didn't explain. In the dining hall, Ivy was radiant. Golden silk, glossy curls. She looked like the cover of a lifestyle magazine. Nathan stood next to her, navy suit, champagne in hand. Their eyes met mine. Ivy's smile flickered. Nathan's face lit up with something unexpected recognition. But not from a wedding rehearsal or holiday dinner. From elsewhere. It was subtle, but real. As the room filled, so did the volume of the familiar din. I caught fragments. Still doing design, I think. Freelance, mostly online stuff. Ivy's launching her own consultancy next year, so proud. I didn't correct anyone. Let them talk. Because the bloom was coming, not in the form of revenge, not with fire or fury, but with clarity. Clarity that would catch them mid-sentence. Because soon someone in this very room would say my name, and not with pity, but with awe. It began exactly how I expected. With small talk. The kind that scratches your skin instead of your mind. Still in Brooklyn, still doing the creative thing. Ivy says you're doing something online. That's great, honey. That's great, honey. I wanted to smile and say, yes, actually just licensed my curriculum to 3 Fortune 500 companies. I teach design thinking to VPs now, but I didn't. I let them fill in the blanks with their assumptions. I had learned long ago that sometimes silence doesn't just protect you, it exposes others. The engagement party was opulent. Gold-trimmed everything. A string quartet near the garden. Wine imported from a family-owned estate in Tuscany. Ivy always had a taste for spectacle, and today she was the showrunner of her own movie. Nathan, to his credit, looked genuinely in love, but he also looked curious. Every few minutes I caught him glancing my way, as if trying to place a memory that didn't quite fit the family photo. And then came the toast. Uncle Douglas, Ivy's father, tapped his glass. The room quieted. My daughter, he said, voice steady, eyes misty, has always known who she is. That's what makes her powerful. Unlike some people who drift, Ivy built herself a future. He looked at me, directly, deliberately. Laughter scattered across the room like glass shards. My stomach didn't drop, my eyes didn't sting. Because I had prepared for this moment not just emotionally, but strategically. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a soft gray envelope. Inside was a single business card, no logo, just 3 embossed lines. Claire Monroe, founder, Idea Bloom. We teach the world how to think in color. I slipped it into my hand, held it loosely. Not as a weapon, as a mirror. Because the next moment was not mine to create. It came from someone I didn't expect. Nathan. He raised his glass but didn't toast. He turned slightly in my direction. You know, he said, voice casual but firm. It's funny. We've actually been using a new learning platform at the firm. A pause. Completely revolutionized our onboarding process. Clean design, intuitive modules. People actually finish the content. He sipped, smiled, looked directly at me. Wait. Claire Monroe. I met his gaze. Something flickered in his expression, confusion melting into realization. You're the Claire Monroe, he asked. The room tensed. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The founder of Idea Bloom. And just like that, the dynamic shattered. Not with a bang, but with a name. Mine. A ripple passed through the crowd. Aunt Marla gasped. One of Ivy's bridesmaids choked on her Prosecco. Nathan continued oblivious to the family's unraveling. Our learning team's obsessed with your framework. Melissa, my L&D lead, she's quoted your Notion library like gospel. I didn't realize. His voice softened. I didn't realize you were family. Ivy's hand tightened around her champagne flute. She's been doing this for a while, she said, forcing a smile. I said nothing, because this wasn't about me bragging. It was about everyone else realizing I had never needed their permission to bloom. Later in the hallway outside the dining room, Ivy approached me. Her voice was calm, but the tension clung to her like perfume. You've been sitting on all this success, she asked. Why didn't you tell anyone? I turned to her, searching her face for something regret, curiosity, sisterhood. Anything, but all I saw was ego bruised by surprise. I tried, I said quietly. Years ago, you laughed. She opened her mouth, closed it, then said the thing that would stay with me longer than any insult. I thought you'd outgrow it. She said it like she still believed it, like success for me was a fluke, a lucky sprint, not a marathon I had trained for in the dark. I nodded. Well, I replied, stepping past her. Turns out I didn't. The car ride home was quiet. I didn't replay conversations. I didn't craft comebacks. I just opened my phone, pulled up my speaking schedule, and stared at the line item for next week. Women Who Build, DC Panel Education Innovation. And I smiled, because recognition from strangers doesn't heal everything. But sometimes it reminds you that the world is bigger than your origin story. And that's enough. The days after the engagement party should have felt triumphant. After all I'd been seen, recognized. Not for my potential, not for my manners, not for how nice I looked in that navy dress, but for my work, my impact, my name. And yet somehow it didn't feel like a victory. Because in the Monroe family, recognition doesn't always trickle down. It calcifies, hardens, then quietly reasserts itself as condescension. The Monday after the party, I received a call from Aunt Marla. "Sweetheart," she said in that sugar-drenched tone that always preceded a cutting remark. "We had no idea you were doing so well. Ivy told us you were doing some freelance projects, but this training empire of yours. You should have spoken up," I said evenly. No one listened. She laughed. "Well, sometimes we all tune out a little when someone's just starting. But now that you're officially successful, we'd love your advice. Ivy's thinking of launching a thought leadership series. Maybe you two could collaborate. The word hit me like a slap. Ivy, who had once sneered at the very idea of online learning, now wanted my help to rebrand herself as a thought leader. It was almost funny. Almost. Then came the real blow. A family friend, Mrs. Ellison, long retired sharp as ever, forwarded me a video clip. "Thought this might interest you," she wrote. It was a TikTok-style video. Ivy standing in front of a whiteboard with "Creative Confidence for Women" scrawled in pink marker. "Too many women," she said brightly, "are told that they're not creative enough or technical enough to launch their own projects. I'm here to say, yes, you can." The comments were glowing. "You're such an inspiration." Finally, someone talking about this. I needed to hear this today. I scrolled past the hashtags. At Design Thinking, Agile Growth Mindset, Hartzau, Build in Public hashtags I had coined in my own content over a year ago. And they're tucked at the bottom, barely visible. Inspired by the amazing work of my cousin Claire, ideabloom.co. No link, no tag, no real credit. Just a whisper of attribution soft enough to seem generous. Loud enough to protect her reputation. That night, I sat in my living room, surrounded by the very modules Ivy had watched me build. She'd never asked about them, never commented on a single post, never subscribed to my newsletter. But now that the bloom was visible, she was trying to clip the petals. I took a breath. Then I did what I always do when emotion threatens to derail me. I opened Notion. I clicked into my Impact and Integrity dashboard, a section I had built for this exact moment. Because success without boundaries invites theft, and clarity without strategy invites erasure. I opened a new document, title Visibility Licensing and the Ethics of Inspiration. Inside, I drafted a public post, not naming names, just facts. If your work is being referenced by others, but not attributed, say something. Not from bitterness, but from clarity. Creative labor is labor. If they can borrow your voice, they can cite your name. I hit publish. Within 24 hours, it had over 2,000 shares. Designers, educators, thought leaders. They all weighed in. Some shared stories, others tagged brands. A few sent me messages thanking me for speaking what they were too afraid to say. And then came the message I didn't expect, from Nathan. "I had no idea Ivy was using your material like this. That's not okay. I'm sorry," a pause. "Then you don't need my validation, but just so you know, most of the firm follows you, not her." I didn't reply, not out of cruelty. But because I had learned a brutal truth in the past year, applause doesn't erase harm, and proximity doesn't equal respect. That Friday, I hosted a private webinar for educators in underrepresented communities. 45 women showed up, most from small towns, public schools, nonprofits, all of them hungry for tools, not just inspiration. I began with a slide that said, "Don't let borrowed voices become your silence." Because I knew now this wasn't about family anymore. It was about ownership. And I wasn't just here to survive the ridicule. I was here to outgrow it. It was supposed to be just another networking brunch. A catered champagne-spritzed event hosted by the Aldridge family, Nathan's side, meant to blend Ivy's social circle with his. Soft jazz in the background. Polished speeches. The kind of event where people say synergy too much and everyone pretends they're not sizing each other up. I wasn't going to attend. After the TikTok plagiarism debacle and Ivy's half-hearted "it was just inspiration" defense, I had no desire to be in the same zip code, let alone the same garden. But the invitation came from Nathan's mother, not Ivy. A handwritten card, delicate calligraphy. "Claire, I've heard so much about your work. I'd love to meet you in person." Curiosity won, and maybe a bit of pride. Because if they were finally hearing my name, I wanted to know exactly how loud it had echoed. I arrived fashionably late. Tailored white linen pants, black silk tank. No branding, no frills, just clean lines and clean intent. Ivy spotted me from across the garden. For a split second, her smile faltered just long enough for me to catch the flicker of discomfort. Then she walked toward me with the poise of a woman raised to recover quickly. "Claire, glad you made it." "I wasn't sure I replied. She didn't answer, just motioned toward a table near the koi pond. "That's Nathan's mother, Eleanor. She's dying to meet you." Eleanor Aldridge was as composed as her reputation suggested. Blazer over a pastel dress, eyes sharp but warm. She stood and extended a hand. "You're the one," she said. "The education platform. Idea Bloom." I blinked. "Yes, that's me." She gestured for me to sit. "Your framework has completely transformed the way Northedge trains its analysts." Even my husband noticed the difference. He asked me why our team was finally thinking in stories instead of spreadsheets. I told him Claire Monroe. I tried to respond, but she wasn't done. "You've built something rare, elegant, scalable." I've sat in on pitches from MIT grads who couldn't articulate half the clarity you convey in a 2-minute module. A pause. Then with perfect timing, she added, "Which is why I was shocked to learn you were Ivy's cousin." She never mentioned it. The table went quiet. Ivy, standing just behind us, laughed a little too brightly. "Oh, Claire doesn't like to make a fuss. She's very low-key." Eleanor turned. "No, dear. Low-key is not the word. Strategic, perhaps. Visionary, certainly. But not low-key." Then she looked back at me. "Have you ever considered licensing your platform internationally? I sit on a few education investment boards. They'd want to talk." Ivy turned pale. The moment broke something open. Because suddenly everyone was listening. Not just Eleanor, not just Nathan, everyone. Someone asked if they could connect on LinkedIn. Another wanted to know how I got started. One man, a regional director at an edtech firm, said quietly, "Wait, are you the Claire who wrote Think Visually, Act Strategically?" We made that required reading for our onboarding team. I felt the air shift. All those years being the ghost in family rooms, the afterthought at dinner tables, they didn't disappear. They culminated, here, now. And the person who had orchestrated my invisibility, she was watching it unravel in real time. Later in the powder room, Ivy cornered me. "You knew this would happen," she hissed. "You wanted to humiliate me." "No," I said calmly. "I just stopped hiding." She stepped closer. "I worked hard too, Claire. I don't doubt that," I replied. "But you built your name by stepping on mine. That's not ambition, that's theft." Her lips trembled. "So what now? You're the golden child." "No," I said. "I'm just someone who waited until the spotlight finally rotated my way and made sure I had something worth showing." Then I left her standing there, framed by marble and shadows, still the center of the room, but no longer the story. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my inbox. A single subject line stood out: TEDx speaker confirmation. You're in. I stared at the screen, breath caught in my throat. Then, without even meaning to, I whispered the words I had once written in a forgotten journal. This time, they can't erase my name. The TEDx stage was minimalist. Black backdrop, red circle, spotlight clean and blinding. I stood at the edge of it, microphone discreetly clipped to my collar, the silence behind the curtain broken only by the gentle hum of the audience settling in. The theme of the event reframing the frame. How fitting. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have had the courage to even attend an event like this, let alone headline it. Back then, I was still asking for permission to be visible, still shrinking to fit into the version of success my family found palatable. But not anymore. Now I was about to step into the light on my own terms. As I walked into the circle, I saw faces in the crowd: founders, educators, students, strangers. And in the second row, I saw her, my mother, hands clasped in her lap, eyes locked on me. No smile, not yet. but something softer, not pride exactly, but realization. Behind her sat Nathan, and next to him, Ivy. She had come. I began my talk not with numbers or accolades, but with a memory. When I was 27, I quit my job at a company that used my ideas and erased my name. And then I went home to a family that had done the same in quieter, more polite ways. I wasn't brave. I was broken. But I knew that if I didn't start building something of my own, I'd spend my life asking to borrow credibility from other people's approval. The audience leaned in. So I stopped asking. I started writing, filming, teaching. I started earning. And I discovered something powerful. Creativity isn't about being loud. It's about being clear. About building something so quietly impactful that one day the people who ignored you have no choice but to take notice. I paused, then looked directly at the crowd. So if you're in a season of invisibility, I want you to remember. Blooming isn't a moment. It's a series of roots you lay in silence. It's every late night, every note no one clapped for every version of yourself you've outgrown. And when you do bloom, don't shrink. Because if your story started in silence, your ending deserves the stage. The applause was instant, standing, sustained. But the sound that moved me most, my mother's small intake of breath. The kind she used to make when I did something unexpectedly brilliant as a child before life taught her to doubt it. After the event, I stepped into the green room. A dozen hands reached for me, questions, business cards, gratitude. Then Ivy walked in. No entourage, no smile, just her. She looked different, smaller, and for the first time unguarded. She extended her hand. "Claire," she said softly. That was powerful. I waited. She exhaled. "I was wrong. About all of it. You didn't bloom late. We just didn't know how to look at you." I took her hand. "Maybe now you do." There was no grand reconciliation, no hug, but it was enough. A crack in the armor, a first step. That night I returned to my apartment. The same walls, same desk, but nothing about me was the same. On the wall above my screen was a framed copy of the email that began it all, my first licensing deal. Next to it, I pinned a new one. Subject: UNESCO panel, Claire Monroe confirmed as speaker for Global Learning Futures. I smiled, because this was no longer about proving anything. It was about building something that outlived their doubts. 6 months later, Idea Bloom launched its first physical learning space in a public library in Atlanta, then one in Detroit, then Sao Paulo. Not schools, not institutions, gardens, where people came to grow. And me, I kept teaching, kept writing, kept planting. Because some women don't bloom in spring. Some bloom when they're ready. And when they do, they don't need applause. They become the light. If you've made it this far, thank you. This story wasn't just about Claire. It was about all of us who've ever been underestimated and came back stronger. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Have you ever felt invisible only to realize your light was never meant to fit inside their frame? Drop a comment below. I read every one. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, full of growth, quiet revenge, and emotional triumph, make sure to hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join this growing community. From my heart to yours, thank you for watching.